Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Build Your Copywriting Business podcast. Hey there, Kate.
Hello, hello.
Hello. Okay, guys, today we're going to talk about a mistake that sometimes keeps us, we as humans, from moving forward. And it's actually a pretty common human bias, but it's also one that we often don't notice unless it is either we come across it maybe somewhere in a resource, perhaps like this, or it is shown to us, it is taught to us. And in fact, I think a lot of the ways that we are taught to live kind of reinforces this bias, reinforces this problem. And we'll give you the full name for it in just a moment. But really, what we're going to dig into is not letting the past and choices you've made in the past and investments, both time and money that you've made in the past, keep you from moving into the life and the future that you would like to have.
Mm-hmm. And this, you can apply this to both copywriting in your career, if you're switching careers, if you're looking to switch careers, if you're thinking about switching careers, but also just personal life. It comes up in our lives in many ways. And we'll give examples because that's what we do here.
That's it. That's mostly just examples. Yes. So the technical term for this is called the sunk cost fallacy, or the sunk cost bias. Mm-hmm. And the idea is that, well, I've already done so much of XYZ, it's too late to change it now. And as Kate said, we're going to give you so many examples, but the idea being, well, I've already invested money in this, I can't change it now. Or I've already invested time in this, I can't change it now. And the idea that I always think of in my head is the idea of when you're not that this happens to you very often, but the idea of digging a hole to try to get to water, but it's not a hole that's going to get to water. But the way that we operate is thinking, well, I've already dug so far, I should just keep digging. If I have to get out of this hole, I'm gonna have to go and I'm gonna have to start digging a whole new hole. And I've already put in so much time and effort into digging this hole. And when we put it that way, it sounds kind of silly, right? It's like, well, obviously, get out of the hole. If the hole's not getting you where you want to be, get out of the hole. Except that this is something that we do all the time, maybe not every day, but very, very regularly.
Yeah. And it's, I think, to your point, why it seems silly, but at the same time, when we're in it, it is so emotional. There's so much emotion tied up into, because especially when you're thinking of, I've invested something, maybe years, maybe decades of doing something a certain way, it can feel very hard to let that go. And it can feel like, well, if I just, maybe it's another year before this happens. So a couple of examples come to mind. I'm going to use my brother as an example, but this could be many people. So I don't know why I'm putting him on blast, besides he doesn't listen to this podcast. So, but I remember having a conversation with him, and he was probably in his mid to late 30s, and he was going through a breakup after being with someone for probably the better part of a decade. And it became this, well, but if we break up, I have to start the dating process all over again. And I really want to start a family. And I thought am I not going to be able to start a family now because I have to start this process over? And it took me 10 years to find out who this person was and realize that I didn't actually, want to be with them. But I think for many of us in this situation, I think for him, I'm going to extrapolate that earlier, it didn't take 10 years to realize that this relationship wasn't working. It just took 10 years to actually move on from it. And he is happily married. And I'm happy to say I have a nephew as
little
of
baby
a
Coleman.
Year ago. Yeah, little baby Coleman. Shout out to him when he's old enough. I'm going to make him listen to this. Maybe he'll be a copywriter. But the point is, it's so hard to see what's possible too when you're in that hole, because you think, oh, it's going to be such a struggle. We just assume that it's going to be a struggle versus what if I'm missing out on amazing opportunities by staying in this hole? What if I go and dig another hole and it takes me a day to hit water versus the 10 years I've spent trying to dig water in this one? And because we don't know, we stick with what we know because it feels easier. Yeah. And it also feels like there's some giving up. There's maybe some guilt of, certainly when it comes to a relationship, maybe feeling like, well, but I've spent this much time. How am I supposed to, quote unquote, give up on it when even if it's the wrong thing?
Well, and that's part of it, right? Is that the sunk cost fallacy is well, maybe if I just stick with it, it'll get better, even though we know in our hearts that it's not going to get better. I think the other great example is we were just talking about people left and right. We have their permission. Well, actually, we don't have your brother's permission, but
it's fine.
Again, he doesn't listen. It's great. Megan on our team, our
Yes.
designer and our social media manager, who we adore. Megan, she's fantastic, but she went to school for a master's degree in higher education. She's obviously not using that master's degree in higher education, and it is, I mean, at least not to teach
Directly.
exactly, but it was a challenge for her and for other people who have transitioned out of, if you go to school for something and you get a degree in something, it can be very much a challenge to say, yes, I have a degree in that, and it's not what I'm going to do for my career. There is the time, the sunk time, there is the sunk cost, and it feels like we were saying, there can be guilt involved. There can be maybe even some embarrassment involved if you said, I'm going to make this commitment. But also, if you know that it's not making you happy, then to continue going down the road of that, the career in higher education or the career in whatever. So many of us go to college and don't ever end up working in that career, but going down the road of something that makes us unhappy, it's going to continue to make us unhappy and quite likely continue to make us even more unhappy. That unhappiness compounds on itself. Instead of getting better, it just gets worse and worse and worse, because instead of making a change, we have dug deeper into that hole.
Yeah, a couple of other people come to mind with this, and we'll link the episodes below with specifically CCA students. I know Sunny went to school for design, transitioned to copywriting, and now I know she's doing an even broader marketing role with the copywriting. And then Tori, who was in sales for years and realized I hate sales and made that transition. But both of them, I think their interviews, and definitely check them out, they have such great advice on this, because it was kind of the realization of, well, I could keep doing this thing and push against something I just really don't love, or I could make that change. And so they decided to kind of let go of that sunk cost trap, if you will, didn't get them. But I think what Megan said to us too, as she talked about this, was all of the things that she gained from going to get her master's degree. She's like, I wouldn't have met my current partner if I hadn't gone to school. And so so many things in our lives are connected. So when we actually look at the value that something brings to us, there's value in everything we do, even if it is she got a master's degree that she's not currently using in that direct way. I'm sure there were plenty of classes and information and connections and networks that she built and gained knowledge from that she is now using in her job as a designer. Does it feel directly related and connected? No, but there's something to gain from everything if we actually let it. And the one thing I want to say too, before we dig more into kind of how to reframe these past experiences and whatnot, is there's a difference between recognizing something as a sunk cost of you've overturned every stone. You've done all of the things that you could do to make something work and realizing this just isn't right, versus, oh, I'm going to decide to do this thing and not actually put in the work to do it. So you're not actually digging the hole, if that makes sense. Of I'm going to use copywriting as an example because I know it so well, but deciding, oh, I'm going to become a copywriter, but then not actually getting the training to do it, not following the steps that are there to find and land clients, and saying, oh, this is difficult or hard, so sunk costs, I'm going to stop doing this. That's not the same thing as
anything is difficult if you don't know how to do it.
Correct. Yes. So I want to make that distinction clear, that because copywriters, as we did an episode, and we'll link this too, about the emotional cycle of change. And so when you hit that valley of despair of thinking oh my gosh, what have I gotten into? Getting through that just requires you to follow the steps, and you will get through that and out on the other side. Versus if you're just, maybe designing a logo, maybe taking action in ways that aren't actually going to get you where you want to go. That's just a distinction I want to make, because as you're kind of assessing areas in your life where maybe you're like, ooh, I'm pushing against this wall. Is it because you're pushing in the right ways and doing the right things to get you past and through and where you want to go? Or is it truly, okay, this is just not, I'm doing something that doesn't align with what I want to do?
Exactly. It's not that you're doing something that's impossible. It's doing something that as you're making progress on this, you're thinking, this is not for me. This is not in my heart. And I think too, something to bear in mind is that if I were to ask all of you, are you perfect? I think all of us would say, well, no, I know that I'm not perfect. Do you make mistakes? Yes. I mean, I try not to make mistakes, but I do make mistakes. And do you make the wrong decision sometimes? Have you ever ordered the wrong salad for lunch? Whatever. But the thing about sunk cost fallacy and us feeling like we need to keep digging the hole, we are effectively saying that we are expecting past us to have always made the right decisions, right? When we know that current us is not capable of always making the right decision, and certainly is not capable of seeing into the future. When Megan enrolled in her master's degree program, she believed that getting into higher education was the right path for her. And then as she got into it a little bit more, explored the rest of the world, she discovered that wasn't the right path for her. But for any of us to get angry at ourselves or to say like, oh, I should have known better, you're effectively saying that you believe that past you was incapable of making mistakes. And you can't none of us can hold ourselves up to that standard. It's not realistic. It's not possible. If current us is not infallible, then guess what? Past us isn't infallible too. And it's okay to make mistakes. Yes, even mistakes that are quote unquote expensive mistakes, like a degree in something we don't end up using, or moving across the country thinking we wanted to live in Tulsa and it turns out Tulsa is not the best place for us, or taking these big or little steps. We are not perfect. We make mistakes, and we have to give ourselves the grace to understand and accept that we do make mistakes. Just because we made a decision in the past does not mean, number one, that it was the right decision to begin with, but it also doesn't mean that it's the right decision for us now. It could have been the right decision for us in the past, but we change, we grow, we evolve, the world changes, and it might have been the right decision in the past. It doesn't mean that it's the right decision for us right now.
And often, as we get more information, we just need to recognize it as that, okay, I learned something new. And often these decisions give us more opportunities versus less. Folks that get into copywriting, we have so many people in the program that then learn of other fields that open up the door. People that become Adele becoming a communications director, or copywriting is a stepping off stone to other adjacent careers, social media manager, all of these things. And we have an episode on that too. We'll link to that. So many episodes. But the point is that often I think we regret the decisions that we don't make more than the decisions that we do make. If we wait, and I was actually just listening to a podcast this morning that was talking about the data of this, that waiting to make a decision actually it's not helpful to our happiness. And people that maybe make a faster decision, might they make these quote unquote mistakes more often? Maybe, but they're no less happy because they're just moving forward and they're getting on with their life. Especially if these decisions are, should I put white bread or seeded rye for my sandwich? You want to make that decision relatively quickly.
Well, on top of that, our lives are not linear. Right? This idea that like get on this path and this is going to be the one path. When we take a moment, we pause and we think about that logically, we see throughout our lives all the like little bit of meandering that I thought I was going on this path and I thought I was going on this one, but giving ourselves the grace to not be living a linear life, because our lives don't end up being linear. And it may be that a decision is right for a while until, like you said, Kate, we change and we evolve. We have so many former teachers in our program, and teaching is a beautiful calling, and thank goodness for all of the teachers out there. Thank you for your service. But just because it has been your calling or it was your calling doesn't mean that it has to be forever. I don't know for why we expect the teaching has to be a lifelong career when we don't expect that from very many other careers, but for whatever reason, we put it on teachers. But we have the ability to grow and change in our careers and in our lives as we as people grow and change. So just because we made a decision 5, 10, 15, however many years ago to be on a path doesn't mean that we have to stay on that path. And it doesn't have to be a linear path.
I feel like that's why the quote that it's about the journey, not the destination. I mean, that's literally what life is until we're lucky enough to be here. And so things are going to keep evolving. It's not like one day we hit a place where nothing changes, literally nothing. I think as humans, we hate change. We are resistant to it typically. And so that's why it might feel, I think, especially the sunk cost fallacy, it feels like, well, I don't want to make a change. But that's all life is continuous change, whether we are fighting against it or just trying to work with it and saying, okay, you know what? Bummer. I thought this is what I wanted to do, but honestly, not bummer. Reframing that because great. Now I have information that like I explored that thing and realized it's not for me, but here's what I gained from it. And here's what I now know. Okay, that might not be for me, but maybe all of this is that I didn't know about until I pursued this thing.
It's that phrase, the devil you know, right? The devil you know is what is the rest of it? Better than the devil you don't know? I don't know. But the idea being, well, yeah, I'm I don't like this, but I'll just stick it out until we've all heard that, right? Like, oh, you're not enjoying. Well, yeah, but I only have 5 more years until retirement, or 10 more years, or 15 more years, right? Like, well, yeah, I know, I don't like. Oh, well, you don't like your place anymore. You could move. Well, yeah, but then I have to pay for movers to come in, and I have to. We've all heard somebody. Maybe we've said it ourselves sometimes that like, well, yeah, but I've already done this and I've already done that. And I think the question that we have to ask ourselves is, do we want to be the, well, yeah, but people, do we really want to have our lives dictated by the single choices that fallible us has made in the past, especially because, as we were talking about with Megan, and so many of us see throughout our lives that all kinds of wonderful things come, number one, from the original path.
Yep.
And then we learn things, no matter what our path was, even if it's not the direction we're going to continue to go, even if we're veering off that original path, there are things that we've learned, people that we've met, relationships that we've created, skills that we have built, traits we have found, discovered in ourselves that are useful in other areas as we move on to new things. Megan found her life partner by going down this quote unquote wrong path, which kind of begs the question is any path wrong? Is any choice that we make wrong, or is it all just a learning opportunity?
Yeah, it really is what we make of it. And I think so often too, we let this is where the what ifs come in and reframing the what if. Well, this is what we know. And so what if I change though, and it's worse than where I'm at? Well, okay. So that is the worst case scenario is you decide to make a change and it's even worse than you could imagine. Chances are it won't be, but why we need to reframe it is, what if it is what I want to do? Why are the what ifs always negative is what I would ask.
But yes, but then also, okay, so then what? Right? Well, what if I change my job? Exactly. What if I change my job and I get to a new job and I don't like that job? Okay, what will you do then? Well, I guess I'd probably look for another job. Okay, then you will do that, right? Like we ask the what if, but we ask what if, but we don't answer it. And that is important. Yes. We need to answer. Well, but what if I send out this pitch email and they don't get back to me? Great question. What will you do if that happens? Well,
yeah, we have agency and we forget. Yeah, yes. We have total control over this.
Exactly. I guess for a moment I might feel a little bit disappointed, but then I'll send out another pitch email. What answer? If you're asking yourself, what if? Answer it.
Yeah.
Answer that question. Because as soon as you do, you start to go, oh, actually, this is
not so bad.
This is not so bad. This is manageable. This is how we get agency in our own lives, when we answer the questions that we ask ourselves. And when we say, okay, what if? Well, then I would do this. Okay, then what would you do? And then what would you do? And then what would you do? Because we tend to look at our lives as like one stopping point at a time. But there's no stopping point. We just keep moving and we keep adjusting and we keep figuring out. Like I tell you what, where you are right now, and I say this for all of us, Kate and I included, where we are right now is not going to be the perfect place for us in a year. It might not be, and I mean that maybe physically, but maybe emotionally, maybe mentally, maybe what we are doing and how we live our lives and the people that we live our lives with and where we live them is constantly going to be changing. And you will look back 10 years from now and be like, wow, it's totally different. And that's okay. The more we can embrace that and think of our lives as experiments, the less it has to be holding so tightly to this mistaken decision we made 5 years ago or whatever. The more we can go, okay,
That wasn't a mistake, first of all.
That wasn't a mistake.
It was a learning opportunity.
A choice. Oh, I love that, Kate. That's such a great point.
Yeah, and I think while we're talking about pitches, because I think that's a great, why we say send 2 follow-ups is because we don't want to get stuck in the sunk cost of focusing in on one client when there's so many possibilities and just pushing and pushing against something that maybe they never want to work with us and we won't ever know the reason. And that's okay. We don't need to know the reason, but I think we get hung up as if it's a reflection of us when it's absolutely not. And so you move on to the next pitch. And you send that, and maybe if you really want to work with that first client, you reach out a few months after. Maybe there's a change of people. So 6 months, you say, I'm going to follow up with them 6 months from now, just and re-pitch that client I wanted to work with. We don't get stuck in fixated on one thing that just isn't coming to fruition. You know, think of yourself and not to my grandfather. I'm putting everyone in my family on blast today. Grandfather was a gambler.
The interesting thing is your mom does listen to this episode.
I know, so she'll hear all of it. It's great.
This podcast.
Yes.
Thanks for being a fan.
Not putting you on blast. But he gambled, right? And so I think this is such a gambler mentality of the sunk cost of like, if I just keep playing this slot machine, I will win. And in a casino, maybe that's true. Inevitably, you might win something. But over the I can tell you from having a grandfather that was a gambling addict, on the scheme of things, the house always wins. There's a reason that's a phrase. And so if we start looking at that with our lives and the decisions we're making, we don't want to be gambling with our time, our money, our resources, our everything. We want to make the most out of it. And with everything, there is that opportunity to do that. If we know when it's time to move on from something and we know what we can gain, what we've gained, and to reflect on.
Are you saying you have to know when to hold them and you have to know when to fold them? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, I think that's what I'm saying.
I really couldn't resist.
I think that's what you're saying, and I'm going to say it because well done.
Well, thank you. But honestly, the funny thing is that when you view your life as more of an experiment and not in terms of mistakes or things being right or wrong, or just choices that you make, then to maybe take the gambling metaphor in a different way, is then the house being us, the house always does win. When you look for opportunities to learn and we look for, I got into this new job and actually, you know what? I don't think that maybe this is the right job for me. What can I learn here, or what can I benefit from, or who can I meet and until I get into the next one? Or, I really thought that getting into architecture was going to be the next right career for me, which I briefly almost did. I know, right? Way back early 20s. Okay, if I got into that, maybe I went to school for it. I didn't, but I was interested. Even if that's not the direction, what did I learn from that time? Because as long as we're focused on improving ourselves, right? Gently and with love, but improving it and learning more, developing things, becoming better people, broadening our horizons, meeting more people, then effectively we always win. The house always wins, as long as it's experiments and not hard. It has to be this way. Trying to carve our lives in stone when our lives are not. Nothing is written in stone. Very few things are written in stone.
So before we wrap up too, I would encourage everyone, because I know we all have a sunk cost story, maybe of I'm trying to think of one I could share right now, but think of bring one to mind. Maybe one jumps to the forefront, or maybe you have a couple, but think about what it gave.
Are we confident that exes don't listen to this podcast as well?
Well,
continue. We don't need to get into that.
But think of what it gave you, what it taught you, how it brought you closer to where you're going now. Speaking of exes, in my situation, I wouldn't be with my current partner if it wasn't for exes. So genuinely, it's all everything. Everything happens for a reason is very, very true to some extent. If you see what was gained in any scenario, in any of these sunk cost scenarios.
Yeah, I mean, even if we're just certainly I have plenty, but in terms of relevance, when I was first got out of college, I worked at a health club. I was their special events person, and then I was, gosh, what was the order? It was like front desk manager, and then for all I was the assistant general manager, and all of which I still have friends from those days, but all the people around me were thinking in terms of growing within this organization, and you become an assistant general manager, then become a general manager, then maybe a regional manager, and it was that trajectory. And there were just some shakeups within the organization where I had this realization of, this isn't for me. Oh shoot, this isn't for me. And granted, it wasn't a long period of time, that a couple of years maybe, where I believed that this was my exact path, but it shook me. Absolutely. I mean, I would sit at home on my sofa because I was just all of a sudden very confused about what direction that I wanted to go in. And some people might be familiar with the story, but it was actually when I was going through this transition that my mom sent me a book. And this was so long ago that she actually had to go to the store, get a book, put it in the mail about becoming a copywriter. And really what this book did for me was that it reminded me that I knew how to write copy, because the other half of that dynamic duo, my dad, had taught me how to write copy by bringing extra. He was a marketing director, he brought home extra work for me to do and would give me feedback on it. So if I hadn't gone through that, if I hadn't gone through that moment of confusion and despair feels like a big word, but I don't know, maybe 21, 22-year-old Nicki was feeling that level of despair, then it wouldn't have led to my mom sending me this book, reminding me that it was a possibility for me going down that road, becoming a copywriter, also deciding to teach people to become professional copywriters, and then creating a program that has trained more than 12,000 people. But 21, 22-year-old Nicki had no concept that any of this was in the future. I had no concept. And also that a lot of the skills that, even, it sounds so funny, but even a lot of the skills that I learned working at that health club are very usable in many, many different ways. And I could do a whole episode on that, even in today on a regular basis. But me in my despair, my 21, 22-year-old going, what, maybe 21, 22, 23, thinking, what was I thinking? What am I going to do now? I've spent so much time, quote unquote, right? When you're 21, 22, it's right. But I've spent so much time doing this. I thought I was going down this right path. Did I make a mistake? Maybe I even went to school for the wrong thing. Should I go back to school, become an architect? This was all back then. All of this wonderfulness has come through. I just couldn't see it in that, because I'm not psychic, right? I didn't know. And I didn't let myself be okay with exploring. And now
the possibilities. Yeah,
exactly.
That.
And all
I think
of this
about that often
I
was worked at a sporting goods store in college. And I think one of the best things when I look back at that was I had to interact with customers. And as someone who at the time felt, shy at the very least, if not, completely introverted and drained by conversations on an ongoing basis. But I was forced to just have interactions with strangers. And that was such a valuable skill. Such a valuable skill. Also met Tom Brady's dad, which is fun.
Interesting. Yeah. Very interesting. Yeah. I once sat at a restaurant that Tom Brady had just exited. Just evacuated, just left.
Hopefully not evacuated.
Oh, God. No, but that's why it took so long to get our table, because Tom Brady and Giselle were taking their sweet time leaving.
Very New England stories. I love it.
They're right. It's New England. Everybody's like 2 degrees from Tom Brady. 2 degrees from Tom. Go Tom. Go Tom. 2 degrees from Tom Brady. Yeah. Yeah. So hopefully, if you are maybe facing a little bit of a sunk cost issue yourself, maybe if you are in the process of, maybe if it's not a sunk cost issue, if you are in the process of trying to make a decision, hopefully this episode has encouraged you to take things a little bit lighter, be a little bit gentler with yourself. You, as much as we love you, and you are so wonderful and so special, you are and I say this with love, not perfect. And you are also not psychic, which means
Join the
that
club.
Yes. I wish
The
I were
not
in the
psychic
club.
club.
Yeah, I would love to be in the psychic club.
Mm.
But you're not perfect and you're not psychic. So we're all going to make mistakes. But just because they are, well, I should say, you're not perfect and you're not psychic, which means that you are going to make choices that turn out differently than you expected them to turn out.
Maybe better.
Exactly.
Probably better.
Maybe better. Maybe they're not mistakes. Maybe they're just little surprises. Maybe they're choices that turn out slightly different than you expected to, but they're always opportunities to learn and to grow. So instead of, if you find yourself in a hole and you find yourself digging and going, well, but I've been in this hole for so long already, I guess I should just keep digging. Maybe you just a suggestion, maybe climb out of that hole and try something different. That is our loving
you don't even have to climb out. You just have to hop out, which is the most beautiful thing.
Just hop out. Yeah.
I'm not in there anymore. Bye,
We're
hole.
reaching down there. We're reaching down. Our hands are there. Let us pull you out of this hole and try something different, friends. Okay. So with that, we will catch you all in the next episode. Bye, everybody.